We'll be starting in a couple of minutes, so please settle down, grab a seat, and wait for it. Good evening. Hey everyone, thanks for coming tonight. This is our main meetup for Product PH and part of our series for the fundamentals of product management. But before we begin, I'd like to thank Newworks for sponsoring the venue, and I think we'd like to invite Ms. Tia to share a few words from Newworks.
Hi guys, I'm Tia from Newworks. I'm also an associate product manager here. Newworks is a digital ad agency, so we provide digital solutions to our clients through the use of data, creativity, and technology. We also like to sponsor meetups like these and for other communities because we get to be, in the presence of fellow product builders such as yourselves and take part of this exchange of knowledge. So that's really, really exciting. Some of my colleagues are also here on the bleachers. We're they're also from different disciplines, and we're also hiring. So like, just approach us in case you're interested. Right. So, anyways, like, I hope you guys have a good stay. I mean, welcome, and I hope you guys have a New Year's happy stay. Yeah.
Thank you, Mia. So, for this event, actually, we're going to do something new to this event in the way that we facilitate the Q&A. As you can see in the side monitors, we have instructions on how to use the new Q&A format. We'll be using Slido, SLI.io. If you can please go to the website and type in the event code C146, press join, and you'll be able to ask the questions there. So the way the Q&A is going to work this time is it's going to be real time, and just feel free to ask the questions while Bit is presenting, and I will answer them later, right? So the nice thing about it is that other people can see what you've asked, and they'll be able to vote on it. So we'll see which questions are the most popular, and we'll prioritize those. So as I mentioned earlier, this event is going to be the second part of the fundamentals of product management. In particular, it has to do with product development. So we brought in somebody who we've seen as someone who's built a team from starting from scratch into something that we actually are all into a product that we actually are all familiar with, OLX. And I think that his name is quite famous, even amongst our crowd. So I'll let him introduce himself a bit. If you could.
Thanks. Okay, sige. So if you don't mind, huwag mo lang ako para casual lang tayo. Ay, okay, sige. Yes, wait. So, what will Ben be talking about? So I'm going to be talking about, so the title is What We've Learned in the Process of Building OLX. And I kind of see it in three parts. So first I'm going to talk about the culture and the team of the product and engineering team of OLX. Then coming from that, how we set direction and how we plan. And then the last part is how we actually build, how we execute. So to start, let me share a disclaimer. I firmly believe that context is everything, right? So everything I mentioned, so I don't intend to say that the way that we did it is the right way. And your mileage may vary if you choose to try to do things the way we did it. Right? Our approach was always, this might work. How might it work better for us? And kind of just adapting things as we go. So. Because context is everything, so let me share my context. So I'm Bit Santos, so I currently lead the product and tech team at OLX. So I joined OLX in 2011 when it was still known as Sulit. So I started as a web developer in 2004-ish. So I dabbled for a few years in graphic and web design. So when people try to ask me to describe what kind of professional I am, I guess in a sense, I consider myself a generalist technologist. Like I appreciate very much the nitty-gritty back-end infrastructure. I like understanding how everything works and comes together. At the same time, I like how understanding how a product interfaces with the customer and how the customer experiences its products. So I found myself in this nice little role leading our product development at OLX. So my current context is I work at OLX. It used to be sulit.com.ph. It is now OLX, part of the OLX group. So we are a global group of companies. If you ever find yourself in, say, Indonesia, India, parts of South America, Middle East, Europe, you might find our counterparts there. So being part of a global group has also contributed to the way we see things, the way we do things. largely an independent team. So, yeah, that's all I have to say about that. But I won't go into detail. There's lots more stories about that, but that's like a separate thing altogether. I guess also to share, just in case you're curious, just so you know, like the nature of the work we do. So OLX is an online classifieds platform where, if you're familiar with the buy and sell section or classified section of a newspaper, it's exactly the same thing, just online. People can post things that they want to sell or services they want to sell. It's a freemium model, so people can just post for free up to a certain extent. If you're a business seller where you sell a large volume of goods, we would ask you to pay a certain fee because we just want to get our fair share of the value that you're extracting from our system. Yes, so just to start, so I'll be mentioning, I'll be like sharing some books that I referred to that I've read. But honestly, if you're in a product management position, in a leadership position, in general, if there's one book I would recommend, it would be this book. It's from this book that I kind of formed my two main principles of how I operate, how I work with my team, which is alignment and autonomy, right? So alignment is making sure that everyone's on the same page, while autonomy is giving my team ownership, accountability, and empowerment to do the work that they can do and that they need to do. Yes, so alignment. Alignment can mean a lot of things, right? But this is, I think, where the most is where it's most important to align. If you've ever seen the Simon Sinek talks around why. So at this point, it's become almost cliche. But like for me, this is true in every way. You always start with why. And in this sense, why is about in his talk in his TEDx talk, he describes the why as like the core intent of why you do something, right? I did this because of this. You can also interpret the why as your values. This is what I think is important. And I think it's very important that you as a team, as a product team, all decide that this is what I think is important. And it's not just, like the business objective. It's not like the vision, mission, objectives that business people like. It's really the values, right? I value that so for example, I value being independent. I value being empowered. I value being trusted by my manager. I value delivering an excellent user experience. So it's like things like that. You need to align on what is valuable to you as a team, and that informs how you act. Right? So to make sure that you act the same way, that you do things the similar ways, and when you do, that's essentially forming the culture. Right? So that's how values inform your culture. And so culture informs like how you organize yourselves. You form yourselves in cross-functional packs. You form yourselves in an ad hoc basis. You form yourselves according to business objective, according to technology stack, etc. There are lots of ways to do it, but your values inform you how you want to do it. Once you align on culture, that's when you can then start going into strategy, right? That's when you start considering, okay, we've been given an objective by our company. What do we actually do to achieve that within the bounds of our culture and our values? So these concentric, the why, how, and what are usually presented in concentric circles. I think it's also useful to picture it this way, right? So why sets bounds, right? you want to make sure that everything that you do as a team makes sense within your why, within what you guys value. How further sets boundaries, right? So yes, we value this, we value the same things. Let's make sure that we express those values the same way. That ultimately sets boundaries for your what. So you have lots of space to operate your what. Essentially, you just want to make sure that you all are in the same space. So for us, this is how we kind of realize this, our values and our culture. So we got together as a team. We did like breakout sessions. We had different topics like how do we want to build things, how do we want to interact with our stakeholders, how do we want to interact with our users, what's our process, what's our schedule, etc., etc. And then we synthesize these kinds of ways of working to essentially codify our values and our culture within the product and tech team. So this also operates within like the corporate values of OLX, which are a bit simpler. But for me, there's real value in making this explicit among the team. Right? This is how we agree, how we commit to each other. That this is how I will act in working with you. So now we've kind of established, okay, this is our ways of working, so how do we now actually organize ourselves? In organization, how you organize yourselves is another reflection of your culture. Now, kind of taking a step back, just showing you our journey. So when I joined Sulit in 2011, we were essentially a team of 6 or 7, I think. In fact, I think Mika over there in the back would be familiar. He was there when I joined. There was eventually a pool of technical talent being led by a development lead, which is a role I stepped into. And then I worked with our stakeholders. So our stakeholders would be our general manager, our head of marketing, at the time product owners of, they were business development managers of real estate in our cars business. So it's like everything just funneled through the dev lead, and the dev lead kind of just worked together with the team to figure things out. And with a headcount of 7, you can afford to do that. The overhead of communication coordination is just low enough for you to handle. But shortly after I joined, we started scaling the team up. And in 2013, by 2013, we decided we need to split the team up into 3. Where previously, like the dev lead role kind of took on product management, project management, like UX research, but UX wasn't even like on our map yet. Like business intelligence, that was all being handled and coordinated by the dev lead with the assistance of everyone else in the team. So we got into a point, okay, we need people in dedicated roles, in a dedicated product management role. We needed people in a dedicated user experience role. So we formed this little triumvirate where the product management team worked closely with our stakeholders to make sure that we were addressing the business concerns and business requirements. The UX team was also working with our stakeholders and our users to make sure that the way we were addressing business requirements also addressed user and customer requirements. And that allowed the dev team, so at this time I actually went down to the dev team and focused on that. And that allowed us to move faster. So from that, the next evolution was going into cross-functional teams. So this is inspired by how Spotify does it. So they call it squads, we call them packs. So essentially, instead of having a web team, an app team, and kind of on ad hoc basis per project, you kind of form project teams. You have dedicated packs that focus on specific business areas, and then let them kind of run with it. Right? You want to make sure that there's minimal dependencies between the packs, so that each pack can go as fast as they can without really having to worry about their peers in the other packs, so that each of them can move as quickly as possible towards their business objectives. So all in this whole process, so we had like three kind of big areas of responsibility. We had the technical, the engineering and development. We had the product management, and then we had the UX research. So for a while, it seemed kind of clear. Okay, we need people here, but how do we actually, like who does what? Like where does project management fall? Where does design fall? Who talks to the stakeholders, etc., etc. So we had to come to, again, we had to align. This is how we wanted to do things, and this is how we kind of balance setting constraints for ourselves so that we could actually exercise autonomy within our little areas. So this is actually a slide I took straight from the discussion I had with my team when we discussed this in like 2014, I think. So we decided, and this is kind of still how we operate today, where we each understand, like for each of our roles, there's a core accountability. You are accountable for that. But the actual responsibilities that you need to do coming out of the accountability, it's not necessarily your responsibility to do, right? You have to give the opportunity for each team, to help each other out. Activities done by the UX team, well, they're responsible for, they're accountable for making sure that user concerns are addressed. Activities around that could be done by people from the product team, from the engineering team. So the core accountabilities was anything about the business, the product had to represent. Anything about the users, the UX team had to represent. Anything about the execution, the technical process, the dev team had to take care of. Now, the only thing, I think one disclaimer here is that since this, like recently, we actually moved the design team and kind of combined them to the UX. Right? So I think there's a little closer, there's greater synergy or overlap done, and it just kind of makes sense. So that's the only change we've made to this map since then. So I can see questions coming in, pero hindi ko siya mabasa from here. So let's just I guess if you see anything really interesting, just let me know. Otherwise, we can address
Sure.
it.
Most of them are actually regarding the packs and the squads. So specifically, how did you end up organizing the team in the product packs versus other ways to do so? And you mentioned each team should have minimal dependencies with each other. If the teams do have interdependencies, will the structure not work?
Yes. So on the first question, I'll touch on the second question, which is really kind of close to our hearts. What if there are dependencies between packs? For us, it was packs. Actually, one of the biggest challenges. So everything that I'm showing here is like what we aimed for, right? What we aspired for. Not everything here we actually achieved perfectly. So, like for this, one of our biggest limitations was at the time that we did this, we only had 2 designers across 3 teams. We only had, I think we had 3 mobile app developers, so 2 Android and 1 iOS app developer. And ideally, you have like one of each in every pack. Right? So we had to share these people across these packs. So we had to trust them that they could balance the time. And there was constant like back and forth and a lot of stress on these people. It's really just realizing the principle of it. That we want to have multiple streams of work that focus on specific objectives so that each stream of work can really focus on a business objective. Ideally, you have minimal dependence between each one, because you just end up, having when you have dependencies, you just have. How do you manage that? I think that's actually the trickiest part in designing these squads, these packs. How do you design it such that Yun nga, that they have minimal dependencies, right? Technical dependencies. What if one team is dependent on the API of another? What if one team needs to change a certain user flow that affects the user flow of another pack? This is like one of those areas where there's no easy answer. We just did the best that we could, and just made sure that, you know, like one of our ways of working was we want to be transparent and open in our communication. We just made sure that we did that. You know, I have a dependency with you. What do you guys plan to do about it? Please let me know, because I'm depending on you. I can't deliver what I need unless you deliver yours. And we just managed it from there. What was the other question? I think I answered both of them.
Yeah, so
Okay.
you can just scroll it yourself.
Okay, so let me just do a quick peek into this. Okay, so where did the QA testers sit on the student development team? They sat with the developers. We consider them, at least for us, we considered it a very technical role because they had to be familiar with how everything worked. So for us, it was a very technical role. Although obviously, like right now, they sit right next to our product managers because, I mean, I understand also the great synergy there. So they sit together, but they're still under engineering because they need to be very technical, at least in our point of view. Okay, so let me just go back. I think some of these questions are more relevant to be covered in the next few topics. Okay, so we've now kind of aligned now our values and our culture and how we realize that through our organization. Now it's talking about, now we have to align on strategy, right? What are we actually doing and how are we going to do it? And here is, for me, and it gets kind of confusing, I'll admit, especially when I was like talking to how I approach the rest of my team, to the rest of our management. For me, within the what, the strategy is another 3 concentric circles of why, how, and what. So this is kind of closer to the why, how, and what of the Simon Sinek talks, where why is about intent, right? What he always says was, people buy why you do it, not what you do. Stuff like that. So first you have to be very clear, this is why you're doing something because of this. Then you have to align on how, right? What are our freedoms and constraints? What should you do, what should you not do? Constraints would be things like, what's the deadline? Technical constraints, like, we have to use PHP, we have to use Python, etc., etc. Freedoms would be, you can use any JavaScript library you want. It just has to be JavaScript. And obviously KPIs and metrics. This is how we're going to measure our success. Then lastly is the what. What are your possible actions based on why we're doing it? What do we want to achieve and why? The freedoms and constraints. Okay, so based on that, what do we actually do? Now, again, I will step back. A few years ago, this is what our annual business plans look like. It was, oh man, it's washed out. But I also had to blur it just in case, even if it's a few years old. It's a 17, 18 page document that went into great detail. And this is like what we did at the start of the year. Like the leadership team of OLX this time sat down on an offsite, decided these are objectives, this is exactly how we're going to do it. And it took us weeks to come up with this. Right? Now here's one of the nuggets of wisdom I got from the art of action. Details change quickly. So the more details we put in our plans, the less robust they will be. Right? Like almost in any industry, but it's like particularly in at least in ours, in the online industry, in the digital industry. It's common knowledge that things change very quickly. So what more in a year, right? The more details you plan in an annual plan, the more likely that most of it is wrong or will be wrong by the end of the year. Now, similarly, in our old way of thinking, so we have this very detailed plan. We want to be data driven. So that's one of the things we got, right? We want to be data driven. How do we measure everything? How do we measure every person's contribution to this and how in their performance? So if you remember, if you guys are familiar with balanced scorecard, it's essentially a list of KPIs that kind of cascade, right? So you have a top level list of KPIs for the company, and for every single team and person, they will have their own scorecard, which is a list of KPIs that feed into the next level of KPIs. So again, I had to learn just so you don't know what we're up to. But so this is the complete list of KPIs that I had, that the whole product and engineering team had. And that's what we had to monitor, right? And measure. And honestly, like by the end of the year, like half of this was no longer valid. But yet, because we had committed to it, because it was like in the financial budget, we still had to measure our performance against it. Further, this kind of reinforced the thinking that it's the KPIs that matter. So success should be measurable, but ultimately, what matters is your objective, your intent. It's not the metric; it's the intent. So another nugget of wisdom from the art of action: replacing direction setting, strategy and direction, with control, metrics and KPIs. It'd be like asking a compass to tell us our destination rather than using it to help us get there. Right? Let's not forget that KPIs and metrics. Well, I mean KPIs, it's in the name, right? It's an indicator. It is not the goal in itself. So after kind of getting tired of all of that documentation, we learned to do it a better way, and now this is like what our strategy documents look like now. Now it's 3 pages, and it's not even like a full 3 pages. It's a very generously spaced 3 pages. So it's actually in the strategy. Basically, any strategy just needs to have these 4 elements: the current situation. So what's our current situation? Like what are our current metrics? What's our position in the market? What does your team look like? And a statement of intent. Again, what they want to achieve and why. Then you go down an initial list of ideas for potential actions. So this is just to give everyone reading that document an idea of what we might do. But it's nowhere, it's nothing like a committed list of this is what we'll do. And then, almost just as importantly, you have a list of freedoms and constraints. So this is what we're free to do, this is what we shouldn't do. You could include counterexamples, like a failure would look like this, for example. So, going down into the intent, like this is how we formulate the intent. And again, this is almost stripped right out of the book. Obviously, you're free to interpret this as you want, but this is like an easy shorthand to do it. Like, we will, blank, that's what will you do, in order to, blank. Right? So everyone is aligned on what we want to achieve and why we want to achieve it. And how will we measure, at least initially, for now, as far as we know, this is how we'll measure it. This is how we'll measure our progress towards that goal. So the big analogy here in the book is, so the book actually, the art of action is actually based on how the Prussian army, what eventually became Germany, like how they handled their strategy and execution in war. And the way the generals approached this, they didn't want to have a comprehensive plan that they would then cascade to their soldiers to execute to the letter. what they did is they shared their intent. I want to take this bridge by tomorrow morning, and that's the only order they gave to their battalion, for example. It was up to the battalion to decide how they will do it. Because it is the battalion, the soldiers on the ground, that knows the ground, that knows the bridge, that knows how to actually, fire the weapons and fight the enemy. So they empowered them to achieve the intent in the way that they believed it was the best way. So that's why it's important to share the intent. You don't share a plan, you share an intent. Now, describing this might sound familiar because it is very similar to OKRs, the objectives and key results. And it was, as I was like going through my old notes and everything, I found that there are very similar, ways of thinking. Where Christina, what kid of Radical Focus, again, a book I highly recommend about OKRs. She says it's about achieving the best possible rather than the most probable results. And that was in 2000 something. 200 years earlier, the Prussian general Helmut von Moltke the Elder said something very similar. Yes. So, now what about the rest of the plan, right? All he gave was intent. So how does the rest of the team know what to do? You just trust and empower the team to do it. So that's how I always manage my teams at OLX. That's how I expect or trust my product managers to lead their product teams to do it. My engineering leads, that's how I want them to manage their team. This is my intent. This is how I want it. We've already agreed on this is what's important, this is how we should do things. Now I'm telling you that this is my intent. So please, I empower and trust you to do what you need to help me with my intent. Now, an important thing is, again, strategy is not a plan. Strategy is a framework for decision making, right? It doesn't empower. It enables your teams to make choices, to make the choices that they will need as they execute their plans, as they try to make progress towards their objectives. Right? It prepares a team to make those choices. It is a path. It's not a path. It's not a path. It's either you don't take left, you don't go, you take right, and then go all the way to the end. No, I just tell you, go east. It's up to you. If there's a hill in the way, I expect you to, figure out how to get around it. But, it's up to you. You're the one going around the hill. Okay, so let me just take a pause there and see if there are any questions that might be relevant at this time. Okay, so let's just go through it. So now we've established these are our values, this is how we're going to do it, and this is our strategy. So now let's execute. So if you remember, at the start of our student journey, it was just a dev lead of the team. So it's essentially, the dev lead and acting as the control tower and just managing everything. Right? The stakeholder says, this is the project. The dev lead kind of thinks, okay, this is how we break it down into tasks. Okay, you do this, you do this, you do this. Okay, and then let's meet back tomorrow. Let's meet again next week and see how it goes. Right? Again, with a team of 7, 8, it works. It works well enough. But at the time that I joined, it was pretty clear that the team was going to grow, and that requirements, like the amount of requirements, was also going to grow. So one of my first tasks was, please organize the process. And at the time, please implement an agile process. So I was pretty new at this. So okay, let's go agile, let's do Scrum. Good. So I downloaded all the books I could find that were free, and then read all the articles online. So, we tried to follow Scrum as is prescribed. So again, these are actually 2 slides ripped right out of our orientation session in 2011. And I effectively became the Scrum Master, and inadvertently, I also became the product owner. So what did we learn while trying Scrum? It's a lot of additional effort, right? There are just so many new rituals that's introduced to the team, right? You have to do I don't remember the formal names anymore. There's a kickoff meeting. There's the daily stand-ups. There's there was a sprint plan meeting. There's the demo meeting at the end, and then retrospective, and then you also have to loop in your stakeholders. So many people's time is eaten up. Now, you could manage this. You could do this well, but we were a young team and we didn't really know much better. So that was a huge challenge. And it's not just a development process, right? One of the key roles is the product owner, and ideally this product owner is someone from the business and represents the business in those rituals, well, in some of the rituals. Because I didn't get, although I had management buy-in to implement this process, the other stakeholders, like the business development managers and the marketing manager, they didn't fully believe in this process, and they, just send me an email of what you guys talked about. So hence, I effectively became the product owner, and added to my workload. And it doesn't work so well for maintenance work, as some of you may have experienced. It works very, very well when you have a clear end state and you're kind of starting from scratch. Things won't when you don't expect things to change along the way. So one of the prescriptions is you set aside 20% of your time on maintenance. You just commit to that. Say every Friday, the whole team works on maintenance. The rest of the time they work on the sprint backlog. That just adds overhead to people, right? They have the context switch. Additionally, we were a young company and the requirements were changing every day. Urgent things came in, and it's very hard to say no when you know that it's important. So one of 2 things happen. Either you disrupt the sprint backlog and you just, you set a precedent for bad practices. Or you delay these urgent requests to the next sprint. And, neither is really a good option. We were a small team, and another prescription would be, you have one team, you have there's a word for this. Yeah, I think I have one team who's focusing on maintenance every sprint. But we weren't big enough to really support them. So soon after that, we figured out, okay, this isn't working, especially for myself. Half of my time was just taken up by managing all of these artifacts and rituals. What else can I try? So this is about when I discovered Kanban. So how many of you are familiar with Kanban? Okay, good. So since some of you doesn't seem to be familiar, this is a general overview. So Kanban is closer to a set of principles that you follow than an actual framework and methodology, than a formal methodology like Scrum. So you basically follow these principles. For me, the most valuable for me initially was the first 2. First, you visualize the work. So you might have seen these task boards that arrange everything in columns. So now everyone, including your stakeholders, including your product owners, understand this is the amount of work that you're asking to be done. And it limits the work. You should limit the work in progress. Right? So one of the famous maxims when you do Kanban is if you want to go faster, you reduce you reduce your work in progress. So those two combined actually also help you as a product manager, because now you have this tool that you can use that facilitates discussions with your stakeholders, right? So the stakeholder comes in, hey, I need this by next week. So okay, let me walk you to the board. You go to the board. If we to do this by next week, we have to move this back. You know, for us, it's acceptable. Because in the spirit of doing the right thing. If you think that's the right thing, then we'll do it. But be aware that that's the cost, because we can only do this much. So it's kind of, for me, it's a lot about embracing your constraints and making those constraints explicit to your stakeholders, to your customers, your internal customers. So a few things that we kind of adjusted to make it work for ourselves. So one of the first things is we built our online tool that matched their specific process and content. So there are already tools like Trello, Jira, a few others. Like one of the things that we valued at the time was measuring our performance. Like one of the funny things about Kanban is, when you read about it, one of the most important things to do is to measure your throughput. How quickly does a task get from to do all the way to done? And funny enough, like Trello doesn't have any reporting built in. Jira does, but it's a monster. So I just built my own tool, and yeah. So by building our own tool, we also were able to build in our own way of quantifying our work and performance. So you could, categorizing your tasks by priority is nothing new, right? Like P1 to 4. So what we also did was we also categorized our tasks by priority and by complexity. So for example, like the rule of thumb was, if you can do it in an hour, it's complexity 1. If it takes a day, it's complexity 2, etc. It goes to complexity 4. And that kind of allowed us to give us greater granularity of understanding how quickly we were doing work. Another thing that would probably be controversial to some people, particularly business people, we consciously avoided setting deadlines and instead used target dates. So this is a very hard thing to get used to. When you're in a meeting with an internal customer, or even an external customer or a stakeholder, they will always ask, when will this be delivered? For me, and it kind of touched on in the art of action, you just don't know. Right? You can estimate, but you just don't know. So you just be transparent about it. You embrace that constraint that I am not certain. I think it will be delivered in 2 weeks, but don't kill me if it doesn't. Right? Now, the advantages of Kanban. So there's a constant flow of work, because again, people, instead of fixing things in chunks of sprints, you just have this board, and tickets just flow right through. Work is pulled rather than pushed. So this is, again, in the spirit of keeping our team empowered and giving them autonomy. The team knows what they need to do and how to do it. You leave them to figure out what they want to work on within those bounds. So every day, the developer would come up to the board, well, not literally because we had an online board. They would come up to the board and choose, okay, I'll work on this. I'll sign it to myself, and I'll move it into the in-progress column. Sanity limits are built in using work-in-progress limits. Again, those work-in-progress limits are for your sanity, for your team's sanity. This is an explicit declaration that this is what we can do and ensure quality. Right? This is what we can do and ensure that we're happy doing it. Bottlenecks are also more quickly identified. So, again, if you go here in these columns, you can see if in column 4, tickets are starting to pile up, and you see that all the columns to its right are becoming empty, then you know that this phase in the process is a bottleneck. So then you can focus on that, right? right? So in this example, it's the fourth column is testing. So if you see that things are piling up in testing, so now you know, you approach your testers, hey, what's up? And you try to address that. You try to address that as a team, because ultimately it's the bottleneck that's holding everyone back. And lastly, we enjoy doing Kanban because, again, like I mentioned, it's more like a set of principles than a fixed methodology. It gives you a lot of room to adapt to what works to you guys. Now, what does it actually look? So we still do Kanban now. Well, what does it look like now? So this is another book I highly recommend if you're into Kanban. It is unfortunately a relatively expensive book, I will admit, but it was a good investment. So like most Kindle books would be like around $10. This was like $30. But like if you have some GCs around, then it's a good juice. It goes into very technical aspects of Kanban. One of the suggestions is you can have multiple levels of Kanban. So our top level, we have a project level Kanban. So we have a Kanban board of projects. So this is like our initial interface with our stakeholders. Right? They don't really care about the individual tasks. Right? They don't care about the validation of the posting flow. They care about when that posting flow will be complete. So that's the purpose of the project Kanban. It also helps the product managers and the product team to get a better big bird's eye view of where we are towards our goals, and not just get stuck in the project that we're working on now. And then within each project, then each team has its own project board. I highly recommend this book. So again, there are a few things that we tried that they recommend. So I'd just like to mention, one thing is if you're able to size your tasks consistently, you're able to you should like the flow of work should stabilize to a point where you can reliably predict how quickly work goes through, that you can actually start committing to people, to your stakeholders. Right? If you have enough data to say that, over the past 3 months, on average, a task gets completed in 8 days. You can now set that expectation to your stakeholders. When you have a new task, it'll take 8 days. He further suggests that you have classes of work where, some work is more important than others. A simple example of classes of work would be just priorities. Like P1 is more important than P2. Then you set that, and then you create a policy. If there's a P1 ticket on the board, do not move any tickets with lower priority before that P1 ticket. Right? So that's one thing. And then the next thing is, now you can measure your throughput per class of work. Right? So when a new ticket comes in, okay, that's priority 3, it'll take us 2 weeks to get that done. That is something we fail to do. It's very, very hard. But just as a numbers leak, that really gets my interest. But I still haven't figured out how to make it work. If any of you make it work, please let me know how you do it.
So I think we can just go through the questions.
Okay, yes.
So guys, if you have immediate questions just regarding the slide that we just talked about, I think now would be a good chance to just raise them up, because let's go through the question list as well. If you have questions towards the earlier parts, then I think we can tackle them later. Just put them into the Slido, and we'll answer them later. So any questions with regards to what we just talked about in regards to Kanban? If you have any questions that you feel you want to answer now.
Were there instances of where the how of the team got vetoed by the upper management by their how? Not as far as I remember. Because again, like we actually did the exercise of setting our value, aligning on our company values before everything. So we had a pretty clear idea of how we wanted to do things as a company. And most of our product engineering house, we're just taking those company house and making them just more specific to us. Of course, there are like small details here and there, but nothing really that we were able, everything we were able to resolve. How do you deal with feature custom? Okay, yeah, okay. So I'll there are questions about the process, and I'll get to that. So just so you know, so our process now. One thing we did take from Scrum is we do have 2-week sprints. So it's not a sprint in the traditional sense, but it's just a nice rhythm for us, where every 2 weeks we kind of check on how we're doing. Are we still doing the right things? Should we adjust? And it's also like the time where we meet our stakeholders and give them updates and get their input. We still do daily stand-ups. It's very, very valuable. I know that if you've never done it before, there can be skepticism and cynicism from the team. Why are you taking 5 minutes of my time from me? And especially if you're doing it for the first time, it can go as long. I mean, it's supposed to be a stand-up meeting, like 5 to 15 minutes. If you're doing it for the first time, you could fall into the trap of having 30-minute to 1 hour stand-ups, and that's not a stand-up. One thing that really kept their sanity is no releases on Fridays. Right? We don't want people worrying that their release on Friday needs to be supported over the weekend. So that's one thing that we've done to great success. So this one, I'm just going to zoom in. There's no real flow to this, I have to admit. Learning monitoring, choosing KPIs. So now we've kind of decided, okay, this is what we're going to do. How are we going to measure our success? So we found, well, at least for me, what I find to be very helpful is you build a model and break it down. Like you understand, you create a model of how something works, right? This goes into this goes into this, from here to go here or here. And you just break that down. Okay, which of those points is important and which part should I focus on? Now this is one of the things that we struggled with. There's nothing wrong with shared goals. So ideally, I think that it was touched upon, ideally each team, each person doesn't really have any goals or objectives or like personal KPIs. Someone's KPI should only be influenced by that person, right? That's the ideal case. And a lot of time that's not possible. If you ask me, it's possible, but as long as everyone is on the same page, right? And everyone trusts each other. You can't have shared goals if people don't trust that each person is doing their shared goal. Now, an example of a model. So this is an actual model that we're working on now. This is our buyer model, right? People come to the site, come to the platform. What we want them to eventually become buyers by contacting a seller, at which point we consider them a buyer. So it's a conversion of active users, of active users into buyers. Right? Formerly, we were only looking at that conversion rate, but we never really understood how to move that number. Right? Now we know better. We broke this down into a more specific model. From an active user, someone who just lands on the website, for example, first browses and searches, right? They go through our results, they do searches, they filter our categories. Once they've gone through the search results, then they view an ad. Right? Then from viewing an ad, once they've viewed some ads, then they contact sellers and they become buyers. So now, what is our historical conversion rate per step of the model? And then looking, okay, what can we actually influence? What is most important here? Instead of focusing on the whole thing. Next thing we learned, make measurement first-class product requirement. Don't consider it like an add-on. Don't consider it something that the business is just asking for, or your BI team is asking for, and it's a bother. First, that mindset isn't healthy. But second, ultimately, you're the one who's going to benefit from it. So we have for the technical people, we have like StatsD for real-time platform performance. We have, I think that's Mixpanel in the middle. That's Pingdom for uptime, and then we have New Relic for further real-time performance. So, we're very much devout members of the Church of Graphs, and we monitor these religiously. I'm kind of touching on business intelligence, and this is for me very close to product management, right? You can't be a good product manager if you're not capable of doing analysis, diving into the numbers. And just something we realized that understanding what's happening is just the first step. You have to get to a point where you're able to identify what can you affect based on our historical data. What is the best thing that we can affect to move the numbers the right way? And in the future, machine learning, data science, it's becoming. You have to get to predictive analysis, where you can predict what might happen. So that is something that we're still working on. And if you have a data and analytics team or a business intelligence team, there's great value in looping them into what you're doing to make them part of your team, to get their thoughts. They're closest to the data, and they can best give you a picture of what's going on and what you can do about it. Okay, this is my last topic. Okay, I'm almost about the. Okay, so learning from a customer. So how does UX fit into everything? So this is one of the last areas of our team that kind of formed and became clear of how we want to do things. So how do we consider the user experience in the process? Primarily in these three ways. And these things kind of formed just in the last 2-3 years. So multivariate testing or A/B testing. So we use Optimizely. I hope you guys all know that. So that helps a lot, even in the apps. But also, occasionally we do what I call A and B tests. Because sometimes to test something, there's no other way to test something than actually building it. And sometimes it's important enough and it's worth it. So you just build it, you release it 100%, let it run, you watch how your numbers move, and then you turn it off. Right? And then compare your before and after. And for me, that's less than ideal, but it's better than nothing. Also, don't do multivariate tests for the sake of it. So I remember, in the OLX group, one of our global managers kept saying in his old company they did 200 tests a day. Okay, that's something we can aspire for. So we started. I think Mika would be familiar with this. I think we started 10 tests a day max, and we just tried to perform more and more tests. But at some point, you just realize you're just squeezing lemons, right? A percentage, a 2% increase of a 15% conversion rate. That's nothing to celebrate. I mean, it could be if you've exhausted everything, but make sure that you're testing the right things, that you're using your time usefully. Also, interpret results with a grain of salt. So just because something turns green on Optimizely and says that it's a statistically significant positive result doesn't mean that that's a winner that you should do it. Again, if you've increased 2% on a 5% conversion rate, is it really worth your time to go into implementation? Right? Maybe not. Usability testing. So this is something that we've been doing a lot more over the past year or two, where we actually observe our users, going through our apps, or Sometimes they would go through prototypes. And sometimes we do it to test how our current product is doing. Sometimes we do it to see how our product might do in the way that we've designed some new things coming on. My advice here is have a clear idea of what you want to test. Right? Usability testing is very expensive in terms of time, effort, and in some cases money. Right? You have to hire a recruiter to get your participants. You actually have to give these participants rewards to make it worth it for their time. And this can take like 3 weeks, right? It'll eat up 3 weeks of your UX research team. So make sure that you're testing the right things and it's really worth it. And this is something we've done whenever we're facing a big problem that we don't understand. So we can't afford to do it regularly. But every time we face a business challenge that relates to our users that, we have no idea why this is a problem. We go to user testing. We learn from the actual users. And a few times, the usability testing actually was part of a sprint zero. So you may have heard of this. Sprint zero is essentially like a whole sprint where the focus is on learning and designing as a team before you actually build anything. And you really spend time on it to the point that it's almost like its own sprint, which is why it's sprint zero. So we've done this twice, where we started the sprint zero with usability testing, with A/B testing, like a whole slew of user testing, of user research methods to gather everything that we could. So the UX team met, they gathered the results, they shared it to the team, they sat down with the team, sometimes with some of the stakeholders looped in, and we analyzed them together, we synthesized them together, we came to solutions together. And that was very effective for a lot of our big initiatives. So yeah, we've done it a few times at full scale, at sprint zero, design sprints, which, yeah. We've done design sprints at a full scale a few times as a sprint zero. So design sprint is essentially that. You take user data, you take user problems, synthesize those, and come to solutions as a team. So this can be, at full scale, this can be like a 5-day process. A lot of times you can't afford to have your whole team working on this for 5 days. So more often we've done it at smaller scale. The user research part, we let our UX team run with it while the rest of our development team continues developing. And then once the UX team is ready to share results, that's when the rest of the team gets moved in. We spend maybe like 2 half days going through the results, analyzing it, and then synthesizing it. And then we come to a unified plan at the end. So a design sprint doesn't have to be expensive, and you can do it in parallel with everything. So I wasn't able to come to a nice wrap up, but that's basically how we do things, how we've done things. Again, it's all about making sure that everyone is aligned, that this is how we want to do it. These are our values, this is how we want to execute, and then just becoming clear about this is what we want to achieve, and this is why we want to achieve. So then that everyone has the knowledge, ability, and space to do what's necessary to achieve those goals. So, that I'll go to the questions.
Yes. Just go ahead.
Was there a time when you had to deal with pressures from investors or a boss in form of a new feature or shorter deadline? So, in the process of making this presentation, it did force me to go through like years of my email archives and documents and everything. So I did revisit a lot of major challenges. And I will admit, there were a few times where, like looking back, like we didn't push back hard enough. my belief that everyone in a company is responsible for a certain area of the business, and that you should own that. You should own your area of the business. If you believe that your area of the business is in danger, or you can't do what's being expected, you have to be upfront about it. You have to push back. But ultimately, business is business. There are certain things that are non-negotiable. You just have to adjust. At the same time, that's why it's important to always understand why something is important, right? For example, there was one time where a GM came to us and said, we have to increase our monthly revenue by 50% next month, or by the end of this month. Seriously? Why? And then he explained it to us. And from there it made sense. Okay, I understand. Thank you for explaining. Based on that situation that you described to me, okay, I have a clear idea of what we can actually do. And it just kind of comes from there. Right? I think at the end of the day, we weren't able to get to make the whole difference. We got close to it, and at the end of the day, everyone knew that's the best that we could do, and we lived with that.
So,
Yeah.
which one was the one you answered?
Yeah, this one. Okay, your ways of working was created by the product technical OLX, yes. Were there inputs from upper management? No. This was really a team effort. The only indirect input from upper management was our company values. We also, just as a courtesy, FYI, these are our values. Let us know if there's any violent reactions. Fortunately, there weren't any. Because again, we made sure they were aligned with our company values.
So I guess the next question that we had was, can you talk what didn't work through the transformations? What are the top 3 things you've learned about the failure or the lessons that you've learned?
That's a good question. I think, like I mentioned, there are some times where it's okay to push back, especially in terms of business direction. If you really believe that the direction you're being asked to go is the wrong direction, speak up. Yes, at the end of the day, there will be times that you have no choice. But you'll never know when those times actually are unless you actually try pushing back. And in those times, it's most important for you to ask why. Why is this important? Give yourself a chance to be convinced that this is the right thing to do. It gives you the chance to buy into what's being asked. At the same time, you challenge your stakeholder to make sure that their thought process is sound. That's one thing. Transformation. The level of autonomy that you can give to your team, that's a very tricky thing. Autonomy without constraints doesn't work. I think that would be my learning. You have to be very clear of what your constraints are. I think almost all disagreements in a work environment are about misaligned expectations. Right? I expected you to do this and you didn't do it. Right? Or I expected that I would be responsible for this. Why are you doing it? You're doing it wrong. I expected you to do better. So it's making sure that the constraints put into place by expectations are made clear. You have to put effort into making those upfront and explicit. Does that make sense? I hope so. Let me know if you do.
I think just continue voting, guys, because it gets updated every time, so we'll see which
Ako, remoting pala.
Yeah. So we'll see which questions are actually becoming the most popular. And one question that actually just popped up just now is, how is performance evaluation implemented to help protect the why, values, and the how, culture?
Oh man, we had quite a journey on this. Performance evaluations. Yeah, every year for a week up to like a month, like just hell, isn't it? Going through the form of performance evaluation. So we've learned. So it started as trying to be as qualitative as possible with the balanced scorecard, with all of these metrics and KPIs. Each metric comes out to a score on a 1 to 4, 3 being a passing, 4 being excellent. So for each KPI, you get a score of 1 to 4, and then you average that, and it's also additionally it's weighted. So then at the end, you get your whole year is summed up in a number that is from between 1 and 4. We realized that didn't work. Right? It's not reflective, and it's not reflective of the person's contributions to the company, and it's not fair. Right? Additionally, if you're measuring someone's performance at the end of the year based on goals that you had set at the beginning of the year, you could expect that a lot of those goals aren't really valid anymore at the end of the year. So going fully quantitative, fully quantitative didn't work. It shouldn't work. That's not how we do things. And yes, to the point of the question, you also want to consider how things were done, right? You want to consider what the results were, and you want to consider how those results were achieved. I don't remember where I read it. It's like it's almost a famous thought where, you don't want rock star jerks in your company, right? They may be a rock star and do everything as quickly as anyone and as well as anyone, but they're complete jerks about it. So, you should reward people for that kind of behavior. So right now, I think we've come to a nice balance where it is a lot more qualitative. We have a set of inputs, but they're not calculated in some robotic way to come to an end score. Right? We allow each manager, each supervisor to use his judgment based on this input. This is the performance based on KPIs. This is his performance based on how we achieved those KPIs, how we acted, how we worked together with the rest of the team. And I give a rating there just to give you input. Again, but those are just input for a qualitative output of the performance evaluation. And yes, it's very subjective, but then you balance that with frequent performance discussions with the direct report, or if you're something for staff, with your supervisor, just to make sure that at the end of the year there are no surprises. Every week you know how well you're doing. And you also further balance that out with 360 reviews, right? You get feedback from your peers. How do they think? What's their qualitative input to this person's performance? So that's how we approach it.
I think a specific question that is also part of this is, how do you measure the performance of the UX designer specifically?
We don't. No. That is a good question. I'll be honest, I don't remember the specifics of how we do it. Robert, naalala mo ba?
Engagement with for minorities. So I was a UX person for 2 years ago. I remember we were graded based on the apps. That's why mine was engagement.
You know what? Maybe I'll get back to you guys in a Facebook post in the group when I get back in touch with the team. So, sorry, I can't answer that now. I don't remember it off the top of my head.
Okay, so moving to the next question. If things change quickly, what's the stopping point for you to help the dev team decide to know what the feature they're working on is finished, at least for now?
So in one of our ways of working, if you missed it, it's that everyone should have a clear idea of what done is. Right? I think that's also one of the tenets of Scrum. What is done, define it from the very beginning. That's my simple answer.
How do you ensure the consistency of UI and UX since things tend to move fast and different teams want to do different things?
You can probably approach Mark for details. You're familiar with that. You worked on it for a while.
Design principles.
Yeah. It's kind of like how we align on our ways of working, right? You also create ways of working, ways of design. Right? Again, having like a set of design principles. It can come in many forms. So, one approach is that we tried with help of Mark was like a topic design, right? So these are our elements. These are the elements we should have in our platforms. This is how they should look like in our platforms. And just having a system. But also, it really helps if you have like just one designer, so everything just looks the same. But at one point we did have 3 designers, and the key there was just make sure that they always met, they always talked, and just make sure among themselves in the space that we gave them that the design worked, right? No designer in his right mind would want to make his designs stick out the wrong way, right? They want things to make sense. And we trusted them, right?
The next question that we had was, how do you deal with feature customization requests that can possibly jeopardize the user experience?
In those cases, we sit down with whoever requested it. So it's usually like one of our business heads. So it's like a high-ranking person in the company. We just sit them down. So again, understanding why. What is your intent for this request? I think it's almost basic customer management, right? Customers, it's a famous maxim is customers don't know what they want. To some extent, that's true, but they may not know what they want exactly, but they know why they want something. They always go to that and try to address that.
So, but how do you know you're designing the right thing before investing in development?
So a lot of times, because we work with a pretty well-defined product, some things are just kind of clear. This is how we want to do things. We also have the benefit of working within a group of companies that are doing similar things. So we can easily reach out to our peers in, say, Ukraine. Say, you guys have done this before. What should we do? What worked for you? So that kind of made it easy for us. But ultimately, just listen to, when you really have no idea, you listen to users. You get user feedback. You get what are their. Sometimes it's useful to know what's their frame of reference. They're asking for a feature that they saw on Facebook. So okay, so you understand that feature on Facebook. And sometimes you just have to make an educated guess. And then make sure that you manage the risks. Right? If something is very risky, it's okay to, if you feel strongly about it, go ahead, and you don't have the time to really test it, go ahead and do it and release it, but just make sure it's in a form that you can easily roll back, acknowledging that risk.
Making it rollbackable.
Yeah.
So the next question has something to do with, I think, the canvas, the process you mentioned earlier. It's what if you absolutely have to set a deadline for some reason, right? Like maybe some sort of event having a due date or something that's bound by a contract. So, because I think this is in reference to the question what you shared earlier, where you have target dates rather than deadlines.
Yeah, so that's like one way of doing it is like as I mentioned, like having a certain class of work where there's a fixed deadline. So for example, on the board you give it a different color so that you know that you have to monitor the date, the deadline of that ticket. And if it's approaching, then you increase the priority. Yeah, it's just figuring out a system to make sure that you're aware of that date. That you can see that date on the board. Again, you visualize the work. Or I know if you're, I would also find it acceptable if one of our product managers just simply had it posted on their monitor. Yeah, this kind of touches on like my philosophy of I don't really care how you figure it out as long as you do, but I trust that you will. Yeah, it didn't really answer the question, but I hope it kind of do.
So the next question has something to do with the process again. You have a full-time Scrum Master to help or remind the team about the processes and to help facilitate the meetings.
Do we have one?
Yeah, if you have a full-time Scrum Master.
No. So one of the more contentious things that we do, well, I mean contentious within the team at times, is that it is my current belief, and I'm not so hard in this belief, but it is my current belief that part of product management is project management. That's just the best way that we can do things in our current context at OLX. And the people that we have in our product management roles, I trust them. I've seen them do project management, like put on the project management hat, and do it very well. So I trust them highly with them. And it's just a matter of making sure that they balance those two hats of project management and product management well, and again, giving them guidance whenever you think they need it.
Last 2 to 3 questions, guys. So please vote on the questions you want answered.
Oh, sorry. Let me just touch on also one thing we do with regards to like managing our projects, because we work in cross-functional teams, and we make sure that there are like a few senior team members in each team, regardless of role. We can almost always rely on them to figure out how to achieve something without anyone in a formal project manager role. So yeah, that kind of organically came out. I think it really helps that we have those ways of working that facilitate that. We have an understanding in the team that that's how we want to work. So that just came out. So that's not something that you can copy and paste with your context, but that's how we do it.
So the third to the last question is, do team members have a say in what gets prioritized in their work? Are they essentially stakeholders and prioritizing their own backlog?
Yes. So our current flow of work is on a weekly basis we meet with our stakeholders. So obviously at any point our stakeholders can still approach us and talk to us about the requirements. But on our formal rhythm is every week we meet with them, they give us input. These are our priorities in terms of intents. It could be during that meeting, it could be in a separate meeting if we think it deserves a big discussion. But it's our responsibility to take that understanding of priority and what's the word? In Filipino, ibabangga mo sa what's possible technically. You would juxtapose it? No, that's too fancy. you compare it to what's actually possible. And then you just give feedback, this is what's possible, this is what we think is possible. And if it's not possible, then you first you explain why it's not possible. And then you explore with the stakeholder what is possible. And that's kind of worked well enough for us. So it's usually the product managers who are part of that discussion. But when things are cascaded down to the packs, to the squads, the product manager also talks to the rest of the team about it. And at that point, it's not a done discussion, right? We also empower the product teams to give feedback to the product manager, who can then escalate it back up to our stakeholder. We as a team don't agree, and it's just open and transparent communication about that.
Second to the last question. What paradigm did you use during your migration from Student to OLX? What were the biggest challenges you faced in this transition?
What paradigm?
Yeah.
So we've gone through a few technical system migrations, but that rebranding, technically it was pretty easy. It's just all changing templates, changing colors. We were fortunate that the suited brand colors weren't so far off from the OLX brand colors. I mean, in terms of the logo, they don't really match, but when you go down to the secondary colors, they're actually pretty close. So that worked to our advantage. So product-wise, it was pretty simple. The big challenge was in our branding, the marketing took the brunt of it, as you might imagine. But I think along with the change of the brand was also an aesthetic change. It was an aesthetic part of a larger change of how we wanted to do things. So part of this rebranding was actually, the rebranding was partly a declaration that the group of companies that we were suited in the Philippines, Tobago's in Indonesia, we were just separate companies in the group. It was at that point we decided, no, we want to work together. So that changed a lot of things in how we wanted to work together. At the same time, it changed how we viewed our product. We always thought, this is how we've done things in the Philippines, this is how we always do things. It's up to us. We can figure this out. But once we decided we wanted to work together as a company, as one global company, we had to merge those visions a little bit. So out of those discussions came, this is the right way to do online classifieds. So it's from that where the big product changes came from. And this is so the branding, the aesthetics changed, and then soon after, the product actually also changed. So as you might imagine, there are a lot of loyal users who knew us as Sulit, saw us changing names, and then saw us changing the way the product worked that they had been so used to for so long. So they got angry at us because we were changing things, and they related that to the rebranding. See, you're no longer the company I knew before. So that also helped us back in terms of product, right? There were some changes that we firmly believed in, and one thing is we removed user feedback. We didn't believe that user feedback was part of our future. We believed that we aspired for our marketplace to be trustworthy enough that it didn't matter who was selling. What mattered was what was being sold, because regardless of who was on the platform, you could trust that person. Right? We didn't understand that, so our understanding of that has changed since. But when we removed user feedback, there was this whole uproar that, hey, I had this positive user feedback score for 10 years, and now you just removed it. I was, it's a lot of struggle. It's just trying to reach out to users, figure out why. So the biggest message here is explaining to your users, communicating to your users. being open and transparent to them. If you're making a big change, make sure you be upfront to them about it. Make sure that they feel that you understand, and make sure that you do understand. And try to help them to understand why you're making changes. Sorry, that was a bit long-winded.
Yeah, for the last question, how do you determine the freedoms and constraints for your strategy? Because you talked about the different components of strategy earlier, right? And freedom and constraints was like, I think, the last component of it. So how do you normally determine that?
I just think long and hard. There are usually unspoken constraints. Right? There are usually strong opinions of what the team should do and what you shouldn't do. And it's just a process of bringing that out from each individual, bringing out those opinions. Everyone has an opinion of what you should do and what you shouldn't do. So it's just about bringing those out in the light. That's a short answer.
Okay, so for the remaining questions, I think what we're going to do is we're going to gather them offline, and maybe we can provide them to you, and Bit can probably answer them offline and repost them on the group later on. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to break out into groups. So we're going to have a count off. Eight. So a count of 1 to 8, and within each group, please discuss what your takeaways were from this session, things you learned, and other things you might want to share that perhaps surfaced as a result of this meetup, right? So, yeah, can you start your count off with 1,
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,
8.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1,
Guys, you guys are discussing once that your group is there, so we're gonna have a discussion for 5 minutes to 10 minutes, and then somebody from your group will share to the full crowd what you guys discussed. So, yeah.
we're like, oh yeah, but then